When the HOA president boxed in his ranch and locked the gate, most people thought Anthony Ridley would give up. But instead, he turned the tables with a move no one saw coming. Anthony had seen fences fall before, but never one like this. This wasn't made of wood or wire. It was made of rules, pride, and a padlock he didn't own. One morning in early March, just as the sun rose over the fields outside Abilene, he stepped out with a cup of coffee and froze. A brand-new fence stretched across his property line, gleaming, unfamiliar, and not his. At its center was a steel gate with a heavy lock and a sign, "Property access managed by the Lakeside Meadows HOA." He set his mug down and stared. His cattle were trapped inside, and his old access road, the one leading to the highway, was now on the other side of that gate. The only key belonged to HOA President Marjorie Kane, a woman known for sharp suits, sharper heels, and an even sharper attitude. Anthony had moved here just 6 weeks earlier, leaving behind the traffic and noise of Amarillo. At 46, he'd worked hard to buy this land. He wanted peace, open skies, and honest work, not a fight with the homeowners association. By the time he reached the gate, 2 men in HOA shirts were tightening bolts. "Morning," Anthony said, trying to stay calm. "Mind telling me what this is?" One didn't look up. The other muttered, "Talk to the board." Then Marjorie pulled up in a spotless silver SUV. Clipboard in hand, she walked over. "Mr. Ridley," she said briskly, "you've been notified of your non-compliance." "Non-compliance with what?" Anthony frowned. "Perimeter fencing must match community standards," she replied. "Until you fix yours, this measure will prevent more violations." Anthony pointed toward his cattle. "That's my road, and my animals need water from the creek. And that," he said firmly, "isn't your land." "The access easement is controlled by the HOA," she said flatly. "It's in the agreement you signed." "You mean you can just lock me in?" he asked. She smiled. "Call our office when you're ready to comply. Have a pleasant day." The gate clanged shut. The lock clicked, and she drove away. Anthony stood there, hands on his hips. He'd faced drought and hard seasons, but never someone this stubborn. That night, he sat at his kitchen table with his neighbor, Glenn Porter, a retired trucker. "They've done this before," Glenn said. "Marjorie runs the board like a queen. If she doesn't like you, you're in trouble." "I didn't move out here to get pushed around," Anthony said. "Then get ready for a fight," Glenn warned. "She won't back down, and she won't hand you that key." Anthony leaned back. He wasn't sure how far this would go, but he wasn't quitting. This land was his dream, and he wasn't about to let anyone take it. The next morning, he drove to town, bought a file folder, and started collecting every letter, photo, and document he could find. If Marjorie wanted a fight, she'd get one. But he didn't know yet how personal it would become. 2 days later, Anthony walked into the HOA clubhouse for his first meeting. The room smelled like coffee and old carpet. The seats were full. Behind the table sat Marjorie, in a navy blazer, smiling like she already won. "Mr. Ridley," she said into the mic, "you're on the agenda for compliance matters." The first 40 minutes were boring talk, pool hours, landscaping, mailboxes. When his turn came, Marjorie looked straight at him. "Let's discuss your fence," she said. "It's safe and works fine," Anthony replied. "It keeps my cattle in." "Functional isn't the standard," she said smoothly. "It must match the community." "This is a ranch, not a golf course," Anthony shot back. "My fence is for livestock." A man on the board said, "Rules are rules. No exceptions." Anthony leaned forward. "You already make exceptions. I saw 3 houses with different fences and no locks." People in the room shifted. Marjorie's smile faded. "Those cases are under review," she said. "Yours isn't." "And what about my water source?" he asked. "You're blocking it." "You have other sources," she said coldly. "We confirmed it by satellite." Anthony laughed. "Satellite? You think you know how I run my ranch from a photo?" Glenn raised a hand. "Marjorie, give the man some time. He just moved in." Marjorie ignored him. "If Mr. Ridley wants to live here, he follows the rules. If not, there will be fines and legal action." Anthony said nothing, but his eyes told the story. After the meeting, a few neighbors whispered support, but most avoided him. Outside, Glenn caught up. "She's got friends on the county board," he warned. "People don't cross her." Anthony looked back at the clubhouse, watching Marjorie laugh with a man in a suit. "I'm not playing her game," he said. "If she wants a fight, I'll bring one she's not ready for." By the next week, Anthony's mailbox was stuffed with HOA notices. Every envelope meant more fines, $50 a day, then 100. They claimed his fence hurt community appeal. Community appeal? Anthony scoffed. I'm raising cattle, not running a resort. Glenn shook his head. They're trying to break you. Either you quit, or they bleed you dry. That evening, Anthony decided to attend the next meeting again. He wasn't there to argue this time. He was there to listen. The room was full, the air tense. A woman named Paula Green stood up, complaining about a tree the HOA made her cut down. She glanced at Anthony, then quickly looked away. When the meeting reached new compliance issues, Marjorie looked at him, but didn't call his name. Instead, she moved on to someone else's violation list. At the next meeting, someone complained about a porch light that was too bright. Anthony listened carefully. The tone was always the same, cold, efficient, and backed by quiet threats. Afterward, in the parking lot, a woman approached him. You're Ridley, right? The rancher with the fence issue. That's me, Anthony said. They're going to run you down until you give up or move out, she warned. Marjorie's been doing this for years. She doesn't care who you are. She just cares about winning. Anthony studied her face. Why do people let her keep winning? Paula's answer was quiet. Because most folks don't want trouble. And Marjorie knows how to make trouble feel expensive. The conversation stuck with him. He realized the HOA wasn't just enforcing rules. It was controlling people through fear. And by refusing to bow, he'd drawn a line no one else dared to cross. The next day, Anthony called the HOA office. I'm requesting mediation, he said. I want to sit down with the board and work out a compromise. When mediation day came, he walked in prepared, photos of his cattle, property maps, and every document he'd collected. Marjorie sat across from him, flipping through a thin binder like she already knew the result. Mr. Ridley, the mediator began. The HOA is willing to waive some fines if you replace your fence within 60 days. Anthony shook his head. That's not a compromise. That's your same demand with a discount. Marjorie spoke up smoothly. We're being generous, Mr. Ridley. Most people don't get this kind of consideration. Anthony leaned forward. Most people don't have their animals trapped behind a locked gate. This isn't about a fence. It's about my livelihood. The mediator shifted in his chair. Let's stay practical. The practical option, Anthony said sharply, is for you to give me back access to my own road and stop pretending you're doing me a favor. Marjorie stood. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. We'll be in touch. The meeting ended without resolution. That night, Anthony sat on his porch long after sunset, listening to his cattle call in the dark. The line had been drawn, and neither side was going to cross it. But the fight was about to turn from quiet paperwork to something far more public and far more dangerous. The breaking point came on a windy Thursday morning. Anthony was fixing a trough pump when he noticed his cattle clustered near the new fence, restless and pacing. He followed their gaze and froze. The creek was now completely cut off. The new fencing didn't just block the road. It blocked the only steady water source on that side of the ranch. He dropped his gloves, climbed over the fence, and walked up to the gate. The lock gleamed in the sunlight. He rattled it hard, the sound echoing across the pasture. No one answered. By mid-morning, he was on the phone with the HOA office. I need access to that creek immediately, he said. My cattle can't be cut off from water. Mr. Ridley, the receptionist replied flatly. The HOA has confirmed there are other water points on your property. Those tanks are backup, Anthony snapped. If we hit a heat wave, they won't last a week. Do you want to be responsible for dead cattle? I can forward your concern to the board, she said coolly, but I can't authorize access. That afternoon, Anthony drove straight to Marjorie's house. Her place was spotless, fresh paint, trimmed hedges, not a leaf out of place. She opened the door in a pale blue blouse, polite but guarded. This isn't about fines anymore, Anthony said. It's about my animals. You're cutting them off from water. Mr. Ridley, she replied calmly, the HOA operates under uniform standards. If we make exceptions, it undermines the integrity of the community. Anthony's voice rose. Integrity of the community? We're talking about living creatures depending on me to survive. Her expression didn't change. The rules are the rules. Anthony clenched his fists. This isn't over, Marjorie. As he walked away, he saw curtains twitch, neighbors watching. The fight was no longer private. It had become a neighborhood spectacle. 2 days later, the first signs of stress appeared in his herd. The cattle bellowed toward the creek, desperate for water. Anthony hauled in extra tanks, but it was draining, physically and financially. "She's playing hardball," Glenn said, helping him unload another tank. "Trying to wear you down until you quit." "She's not getting what she wants," Anthony said, tightening a wrench. "I'll haul water every day if I have to. But I'm not rebuilding that fence." By the end of the week, he was running on fumes, juggling ranch work and endless HOA letters. One envelope had a photo someone took from the road, a tank slightly tilted. The letter called it a safety hazard and demanded removal. "That's harassment," Glenn said after reading it. "That's Marjorie," Anthony replied. Then one morning, something changed. A for sale sign appeared on the small half-acre lot containing the locked gate. The land wasn't part of his ranch, or the HOA's main property. Anthony stared at it, his mind racing. If he owned that strip of land, he'd own the gate. And if he owned the gate, the lock would be his. But he knew if Marjorie found out, she'd stop it. Whatever he did next had to be fast and quiet. Instead of rushing to the real estate office, Anthony drove to Abilene and met with Tom Beard, a local attorney. Tom listened carefully as Anthony spread out the letters, photos, and notices. "I want to know if what they're doing is even legal," Anthony said. "And if I buy that land, do I own the gate?" Tom adjusted his glasses. "They're operating within the covenants you signed. That's the bad news. The HOA has more control than most realize." "And the good news?" Anthony asked. Tom tapped the photo of the for sale sign. "If that parcel really isn't under HOA ownership, and it includes the gate, then yes, you'd have full legal control. But you'll need to buy it quietly. If Marjorie finds out, she'll move fast to block it." "Meaning she can't know it's me," Anthony said. "Exactly," Tom replied. Over the next few days, Anthony kept his normal routine, feeding cattle, hauling water, waving at neighbors. But at night, he drafted a plan. He called an old college friend, Brett Lawson, who ran a property management firm 2 counties over. Brett agreed to set up an LLC under his company name, keeping Anthony completely hidden. One evening, Glenn stopped by and found Anthony studying a county map. "You're cooking something up," Glenn said with a grin. Anthony smiled faintly. "If I told you, you'd have to swear it stays between us." Glenn raised a hand. "My lips are sealed." Anthony explained the plan. By the end, Glenn was grinning wide. "That's bold," he said, "and I like it." Meanwhile, Marjorie seemed to sense something shifting. She started showing up near the fence more often, clipboard in hand, sometimes with board members beside her. They'd stand by the gate, talking quietly, stealing glances his way. One afternoon, she walked over while he was repairing a post. "Mr. Ridley," she said, "we've scheduled another compliance inspection next week." Anthony didn't look up. "Schedule whatever you want. My fence isn't changing." "You're only making things harder on yourself," she said sharply. He straightened and met her eyes. "And you're underestimating me." They stared for a moment before she turned and walked off. The next morning, Anthony's phone buzzed. It was Brett. "The seller accepted the LLC's offer," he said. "No counter, no questions. Closing in 3 weeks." Anthony exhaled. It felt like his first real win in months. But Tom had warned him. It's not done until the ink's dry. Don't let your opponent know you're already holding the winning hand. Anthony agreed. He knew Marjorie wasn't finished. Until she was certain she'd won. That was Marjorie's way. The trick was to let her think she was still in control, right up until the moment she wasn't. But keeping a secret in a small town is like holding water in your hands, and Anthony was about to find out how fast word could spread. 2 days after Brett's call, he drove past the lot with the gate just to make sure the for sale sign was still there. It was. One corner bent by the wind, but otherwise untouched. He parked down the road and watched for a while. The property was small, just the gate, a strip of gravel, and a thin line of mesquite trees. But it was the choke point for everything beyond it. Whoever owned this land controlled the only way into his ranch. The HOA hadn't grabbed it yet, which meant they either couldn't or hadn't realized its importance. That gap was all Anthony needed. Later that day, Brett called again. "Title's clean," he said. "No liens, no disputes. The seller just wants to unload it." "Good," Anthony said quietly. "Let's keep it that way." For the next week, Anthony kept his routine steady. No sudden trips to town, no talk about fences. When neighbors asked, he just said, "We'll see how it plays out." But inside, he could already feel it, the satisfaction of sliding his own key into that lock. One evening, Glenn dropped by with a cooler of beer. "You've been quiet lately," he said. "That's either good news or trouble." Anthony handed him a can. "Let's just say I'm working on something that'll mean I don't have to ask permission anymore." Glenn laughed. "Now that sounds like the Anthony I know." Twice that week, Marjorie drove by and gave him that short, fake wave. He kept his expression blank, but inside, he knew the game was shifting. Then Paula Green caught him in the grocery store. "I heard the board's been asking about that gate lot," she whispered. "They're bringing in a surveyor." Anthony nodded, calm but tense. "Thanks for the warning." That night, he called Brett. "We need to move faster. If they bring in surveyors, they'll stall the sale." "Got it," Brett said. "We'll be in escrow by Friday." The next few days crawled by. Every crunch of gravel outside made Anthony look up, half expecting Marjorie. Then, Friday morning, Brett called again. "It's done. Escrow's open. Deposit's down. We're locked in." Anthony exhaled slowly. "Good. Let's close fast." He didn't celebrate that night. Instead, he made lists, every possible way this could go wrong, and how to fight it. He knew Marjorie would strike back. Maybe with lawyers. Maybe with the sheriff. But for the first time in months, he had leverage. Closing day came on a gray Tuesday morning. Anthony dressed like always, jeans, boots, a simple shirt, and drove into Abilene. Brett was already there, coffee in hand. "Ready to make Marjorie's life harder?" he asked. Anthony smirked. "Let's get it done." Because the LLC was listed as the buyer, Anthony's name stayed off the paperwork. Brett signed, slid the folder across the desk, and just like that, it was over. The keys, heavy and silver, lay on the table. "They're yours," Brett said. Anthony picked them up, turning one in his hand. It wasn't just metal, it was freedom. Back at the ranch, he parked near the road and walked to the lot. The gate looked the same, but it felt different. Now it was his. He slid the key into the padlock. Click. The shackle popped open. He swung the gate wide, letting the cattle wander toward the creek. For the first time in weeks, he felt peace. That peace lasted 2 days. On the third morning, a white SUV pulled up. Marjorie stepped out, clipboard in hand, 2 board members behind her. "Mr. Ridley," she said coldly, "you've accessed HOA property without authorization." Anthony leaned on the gate. "This isn't HOA property anymore. I bought this lot. County records will confirm it." Her eyes narrowed. "That's impossible. The HOA had first right of refusal." "Maybe they did," Anthony said. "But they didn't use it. I made the offer. The seller took it. This gate's mine." One board member shifted nervously. "Marjorie, if that's true." She cut him off. "We'll see about that." She turned back to Anthony. "Don't think this is over." "Didn't say it was," he replied. "But you don't control this access anymore." "I do." By that afternoon, the HOA had sent 3 formal emails demanding clarification. Anthony forwarded each one to his lawyer, Tom, who just replied, "Let them make the next move." Word spread fast. Some neighbors congratulated him in whispers. Others warned that the board was planning payback. Glenn stopped by one evening. "Looks like you lit a fire," he said. Anthony sipped his coffee. "Good. Maybe it's time people stopped being scared of Marjorie." But the real fight hadn't even started. 2 days later, a certified letter arrived, claiming his ownership might encroach on association rights. That Saturday, things escalated again. Marjorie showed up with 2 sheriff's deputies. Anthony stepped out with his paperwork. "Deputies," he said evenly, "this is my land. Deed's right here." The officer looked it over and nodded. "It checks out. He owns it." Marjorie's jaw tightened. "We'll take this to court." "That's your right," the deputy replied. "But for now, he's not breaking any laws." Neighbors had gathered to watch, whispers rippling through the crowd. Some cheered quietly. Others glared. The line had been drawn. That night, Anthony's phone buzzed with a message from Paula. "Be careful. They're calling an emergency board meeting Monday. Word is, they're pushing for new rules." That Monday hit hard. Anthony showed up to the meeting early, the room packed, the tension thick enough to taste. Marjorie wasted no time. "As many of you know," she began, "recent events have shown gaps in our ability to maintain community standards." The board was proposing an amendment giving the HOA control over any access points serving more than one property. Anthony raised his hand. "That's a pretty convenient amendment, considering it targets one specific owner, me." "This isn't about you, Mr. Ridley," she replied, her gaze locked on him. "It's about the community as a whole." The back and forth was sharp. Anthony argued the amendment would give the HOA power over land it didn't own. Marjorie countered with vague claims about security and consistency. When the vote was called, the board split, 3 in favor, 2 against. But it still needed a majority of homeowners to pass. After the meeting, a few neighbors pulled Anthony aside. One of them, a wiry man named Frank Delgado, spoke in a low voice. "You're not the first person she's tried to steamroll," he said. "But you might be the first who can beat her." By midweek, the fight had spilled onto social media. The community page was on fire. Posts about the gate, the HOA, and whether Marjorie had gone too far. Anthony kept his tone measured, posting only facts and public records. But the comments told the real story. Neighbors were picking sides like it was an election. Then came the twist. Glenn showed up one evening with a plain envelope. Inside was an anonymous note. "Check the county clerk's filings tomorrow." Anthony did, and his stomach dropped. Marjorie had filed a notice of intent to purchase a narrow strip of land beside his fence. If she got it, she could build an alternate route and cut his leverage in half. But if she thought that would scare him, she was wrong. The next morning, Anthony stormed into his lawyer's office. "She's trying to box me in again," he said, dropping the paper on the desk. Tom read it and nodded. "It's clever, but not a done deal. That land's county-owned, earmarked for utilities. We can slow her down, file objections, push for a review, maybe even lobby the county." "Do it," Anthony said. "Whatever it costs." Tom got to work. But outside the legal arena, things were heating up. The local paper ran a front-page story. "Rancher battles, HOA over locked gate." The photo, Anthony leaning on the gate, arms crossed, said it all. The next morning, strangers at the feed store shook his hand. "About time someone stood up to them," one man said. Not everyone felt the same. At the grocery store, an HOA volunteer muttered, "You're making this harder for all of us." Anthony didn't bother replying. By week's end, a talk radio show picked up the story. Callers debated for an hour, some cheering for Anthony's property rights, others backing the HOA's rules. He listened from his truck, realizing his private battle had turned public. Then came the annual community barbecue, usually a laid-back event. This year, it felt like a rally. Groups formed under the shade trees, some wearing Ridley's Right pins Glenn had made. Anthony tried to stay on the sidelines, but Marjorie found him. "Mr. Ridley," she said tightly, "enjoying the event?" "Not as much as I'd enjoy having my time back," he said evenly. Her smile didn't fade. "You've made your point, but the HOA will keep enforcing its rules. You'd be wise to consider the long-term consequences of this publicity." Anthony met her eyes. "You've been using fear to get your way for years. That stops now." People nearby went quiet, watching. Marjorie softened her tone, pretending calm. "We can still settle this without court." "You had that chance months ago," Anthony said. "You chose the lock instead." She turned and walked away. Her heels clicked across the concrete like a warning. Later that night, Paula called. "You know she's furious, right? She's lost control of the story. People aren't afraid anymore." Anthony leaned back in his chair. "Good. Maybe that's the real win." Still, he knew it wasn't over. Marjorie wouldn't back down easily, and 2 days later, Tom called. "She's filed a lawsuit," he said, "challenging your ownership of the gate lot." Instead of fear, Anthony felt resolve. This wasn't just about his land anymore. He was fighting for everyone who'd been bullied by the HOA and never stood up. The summons came Friday afternoon. The deputy handed it over with a sympathetic look. "Guess you knew this was coming." Anthony nodded. "Yeah, I was expecting it." The legal jargon was thick, pages about easements, covenants, and procedural irregularities. But Anthony saw it for what it was, a desperate attempt to claw back control. Tom flipped through the pages. "They've got nothing. The sale's clean, the title's clear. They're hoping you'll get tired and settle." "I'm not settling," Anthony said. Weeks passed. Each hearing drew curious locals, some supportive, others skeptical. Marjorie always arrived early, perfectly dressed, flanked by her allies. She never looked his way. During one break, Paula approached. "Win or lose," she said, "you've already changed things. People are speaking up now." Anthony nodded, but he wasn't after moral victories. He wanted a real one. That victory came on a bright summer morning. The judge ruled the purchase valid, the title solid, and the HOA powerless over the gate. The HOA was even ordered to pay his legal fees. When the gavel fell, the courtroom buzzed. Glenn gave him a thumbs up from the second row. Paula smiled. Even a few silent neighbors came to shake his hand. Outside, reporters waited. Anthony kept it simple. This was never about offense. It was about standing up for what's yours. I hope it inspires others to do the same. Back at the ranch, he drove out to the gate. The cattle grazed by the creek, sunlight glinting off the water. He leaned against the post, the breeze soft on his face. For the first time in months, he felt peace. Glenn joined him with 2 beers. Feels good, doesn't it? Anthony smiled. It's more than that. It's knowing that when you stand up once, you give others the courage to do the same. They sat in the shade, talking about the herd and the weather. Anthony knew Marjorie wouldn't vanish, but she'd learned intimidation had limits, and he'd learned that persistence, backed by truth, could win. Weeks later, he noticed something small but powerful. The tone of HOA meetings had changed. People spoke freely, asked questions, no longer afraid. The fear that hung over the community was gone. And that, Anthony thought, was the real victory. Because if there's one lesson in all this, it's simple. The moment you stop letting others write the rules for your life, you start living on your own terms. So if you've got your own locked gate, whatever it may be, don't just accept it. Ask questions. Push back. And if the fight's worth it, don't stop until you've turned that lock with your own key. Subscribe for more real stories that remind you. Your voice matters, your rights matter, and no one can fence in your life unless you let them.